The champagne glass in my hand trembled slightly as the wedding coordinator pointed toward the very back row. "Your poverty will embarrass us." Vivian's voice echoed in my mind, sharp, polished, cruel. Just hours earlier, she had sneered those words while tapping her manicured nails against the seating chart. And my son, my own son, Brandon, had nodded. He didn't even look at me, like I was something shameful, something to hide. Well, at least they were consistent. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Eleanor Patterson. I'm 68 years old. 3 years ago, I buried my husband, Robert, after a long, merciless battle with cancer. I believed that grief, watching the man I loved fade away, was the deepest pain I would ever endure. I was wrong, because nothing prepares you for being erased while you're still alive. Nothing prepares you for your own child treating you like an inconvenience. And nothing prepared me for what would happen at this wedding. The Ashworth estate stretched out before me like something out of a dream. Perfect gardens, marble fountains, wealth dripping from every corner. 500 guests, all dressed in designer outfits worth more than my monthly pension. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the nicest one I owned, and lifted my chin. I had every right to be here. This was my son's wedding, even if he had forgotten that. "Eleanor Patterson?" The coordinator's voice sliced through my thoughts. "Row 12, seat 15. The very back. Of course. Behind the florist, behind the photographers. So far removed, I might as well have been seated in the parking lot. At the front, Vivian's mother sat like royalty, surrounded by her polished circle of society elites. They glanced at me, curious, amused, dismissive, like I was an exhibit, something to whisper about. As I walked down the aisle, conversations quieted, not out of respect, but discomfort. "That's Brandon's mother," a woman in an extravagant hat whispered. Vivian said she used to clean houses. I didn't. I was a high school English teacher for 37 years, but truth didn't matter. Not here, not today. The back row was nearly empty, just a few late guests and some catering staff. I sat down quietly and watched my son, standing at the altar, confident, successful, impeccable in his tailored tuxedo. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who brought me dandelions, the one who told me I was the prettiest mommy in the world. That boy was gone, replaced by a man ashamed of where he came from. The ceremony began, elegant, grand, perfect. Vivian floated down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a year. She was beautiful, cold, flawless beauty, the kind money builds. She didn't look at me once, not even by accident. Brandon's gaze never left her. The intensity in his eyes, it stung. He had never looked at me like that, not even as a child. "Dearly beloved," the minister's voice blurred in the background. I tried to focus on gratitude. At least I had been invited. They could have done worse. Then suddenly, someone sat beside me. I turned and froze. He was distinguished. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. Everything about him whispered wealth, power, confidence. "Act like you're with me," he murmured. Before I could react, his hand gently covered mine, and he smiled at me like we belonged together. The effect was immediate. The whispers changed. "Who is that man? He looks important. Maybe we were wrong about her." Wrong about me. How quickly perception shifts when money enters the picture. "Your son is about to look this way," he whispered. "When he does, smile at me." I didn't understand, but I trusted him, and when Brandon's eyes finally landed on us, I smiled, softly, warmly, as if I belonged, as if I mattered. Brandon's face drained of color. Vivian followed his gaze, and for the first time that day, she faltered. "Perfect," the man murmured. "Your son looks like he's seen a ghost." "Who are you?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said quietly, "Someone who should have been in your life a long time ago." For the first time in years, I felt powerful, not invisible, not ashamed, seen. When the ceremony ended, he stood and offered me his arm. "Shall we, my dear Eleanor?" He knew my name, and suddenly everything felt different. As we walked toward the reception, eyes followed us. The same people who had dismissed me now watched with curiosity, respect, even envy. "You still haven't told me your name," I said. He smiled, and in that moment, time stopped. "Theodore Blackwood," he said softly, "but you used to call me Theo." The world tilted. Theo, my Theo, after 50 years. "But that's impossible," I whispered. "You were in Europe. You had a life, a family." "I never married," he said, "and I never stopped looking for you." The past came rushing back. At 18, love, hope, dreams, and then silence. "I wrote to you," he said. "Dozens of letters. I called. I came back." I felt the truth before he finished. "My mother," I whispered. "She never gave them to me." Everything made sense. All of it. "I found you once," he said. "You were already married, pregnant. So I stayed away." The life I lived, the life I lost, all separated by silence and stolen letters. And then, "Mother." Brandon's voice cut through everything. Sharp, controlled, panicked. "We need to talk." He stood there with Vivian, both of them shaken, uncertain, threatened. "Shouldn't you be greeting your guests?" I asked calmly. "Who is this man?" Vivian demanded. Theo stepped forward, confident, unbothered. "Theodore Blackwood." Recognition didn't come, but fear did. "What kind of history?" Brandon asked. Theo smiled. "The kind that matters." Silence. Heavy. Explosive. "Your mother and I were in love," he said simply, and in that moment, everything shifted. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Brandon," I said quietly. Apparently, I wasn't important enough to ask. That landed. Hard. "And now I'm suddenly worth your attention?" Vivian's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. For the first time that day, they weren't in control. I was. "That's not what we want. We just want to understand who this gentleman is and why he's here." "I'm here," Theo said smoothly, his voice calm yet commanding, "because Eleanor deserves to have someone who appreciates her remarkable qualities at her son's wedding, someone who recognizes what an extraordinary woman she is." The contrast between his words and the way I had been treated all day was so stark that even Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Vivian, however, recovered quickly, her smile sharp enough to cut glass, her tone polished but cold. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "I'm sure you understand this is a family celebration. Perhaps it would be more appropriate if you—" "If I what?" Theo interrupted, still pleasant, but now edged with steel. "If I left and allowed you to continue treating Eleanor like an inconvenience? I don't think that's going to happen." "Now see here," Brandon began, stepping forward, though I noticed his instinct was to defend his wife, not me. "No, you see here," Theo cut in, his polite facade finally dropping. "I've spent the past hour watching both of you systematically ignore and dismiss one of the finest women I've ever known. Eleanor raised you, sacrificed for you, loved you unconditionally, and this is how you honor her at your wedding?" The words I had longed to hear, words no one had ever spoken aloud, hung in the air. "You don't know what you're talking about," Vivian snapped, her composure cracking. "You know nothing about our family." Theo let out a cold laugh. "I know enough. I know Eleanor was seated in the back row like an afterthought. I know your society friends have been whispering about her all afternoon while you did nothing, and I know neither of you bothered to ask if she needed anything." "She had an escort," Brandon said weakly. "We assumed—" "You assumed wrong," I said quietly. "But then, you haven't asked me much of anything lately, have you, Brandon?" For the first time all day, my son truly looked at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. And what he saw made him step back. "Mom, I didn't realize." "That's exactly the problem. You didn't realize, but I did, and now I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." That's when Vivian made her mistake. "Well, we'll just see about that." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. Theo's expression shifted, no longer amused, no longer polite, dangerous. "I'm sorry, are you threatening me, Mrs. Patterson?" Vivian lifted her chin. "I'm saying if you think you can walk into our wedding and disrupt things, you're mistaken. We have security. They can escort you out." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Theo chose laughter, low, rich, genuinely amused. "Your security." He pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "James? Yes, it's Theo. I'm at the Ashworth estate. Send the car around and bring the portfolio." He hung up and smiled. "Security is an interesting concept. The Ashworths have done quite well. Regional wealth, local influence, impressive." Brandon looked like a man standing on quicksand. "Mr. Blackwood, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, there has," Theo said calmly. "You think you're in control." A black Mercedes pulled up moments later. A uniformed driver approached, carrying a leather portfolio. "Thank you, James." He opened it. "These are the plans for Blackwood Tower, 42 stories. Construction begins next month." He turned the page. "And this is the site." Vivian leaned forward and froze. "That's my father's building." "Had," corrected gently. "I purchased it last month. Tenants have 90 days to vacate." The color drained from her face. "You can't do that." "I already did." He closed the portfolio. "But here's the interesting part. I had no idea there was any connection to your family. Pure coincidence." "What do you want?" Brandon asked, his voice tight. Theo looked genuinely puzzled. "Want? I don't want anything from you. You already gave me something priceless by treating your mother so poorly that she needed someone else to sit beside her." Then he turned to me, his expression softening completely. "Eleanor, would you like to leave? We have 50 years to catch up on." The offer felt like a lifeline. But I wasn't done. "Brandon," I said steadily, "you need to understand something." Silence fell. "This morning, when your bride said my poverty would embarrass the family, I accepted it. When you seated me in the back row, I accepted that too. I told myself at least I was included." His face twisted with guilt. "But watching you panic now because someone important sees value in me tells me everything. I'm not your mother in those moments. I'm a liability." "Mom, that's not—" "It is," I said firmly. "And the sad part, you're right. I am poor compared to Vivian's family. I taught high school. I don't wear designer clothes. By your standards, I am an embarrassment." Vivian opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "The difference is, I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm proud of my life, proud of my students, proud of raising you." My voice softened, but didn't break. "Even if I'm disappointed in the man you've become." I took Theo's arm. "Theodore, I would very much like to leave." We walked away. Behind us, panic rose. "Brandon, do you even know who Theodore Blackwood is?" But I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I was walking towards something. The restaurant Theo chose overlooked the Denver skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows, soft jazz, quiet elegance. "I should have asked," he said as we sat, "Are you hungry?" "I think I couldn't eat another pretentious canapé." "Wise choice," he said dryly. "Very expensive disappointment."
The waiter appeared. "Your usual, Mr. Blackwood?" "Yes, and the stuffed mushrooms Eleanor likes." I stared at him. "You remember that?" "Romano's, when you got into the teacher training program." The memory hit me like a wave. "You remember what I ordered 50 years ago?" "I remember everything about you." His voice was gentle now. "The way you laughed, the wrinkle in your brow when you concentrated, the way you stole olives from my plate." Tears burned my eyes. "When was the last time someone noticed me like that?" "Tell me about your life," he said. So I did. I told him everything. My teaching, my marriage, Brandon, the quiet loneliness after my husband's death, the slow realization that I had become invisible. Today wasn't new, I admitted, just public. Theo's expression darkened. "He doesn't deserve you." "He's not a boy," I said. "He's a man who made his choices." "And you?" I asked. "No marriage?" "No one ever measured up," he said simply. Silence stretched between us. "Theo, what are we doing?" He looked at me, intense, unwavering. "I've built everything, but not a day passed where I didn't wonder what life would have been like if we hadn't been torn apart." "We can't go back," I whispered. "No," he said softly. "We can't, but we can move forward."
We've lived long enough to recognize real value when we see it. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, giving me a moment to process what Theo was truly saying. When we were alone again, he reached across the table and gently took my hand. "I'm not suggesting we pretend the last 50 years didn't happen," he said softly. "I'm suggesting we decide what we want the next 20 years to look like." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed inside my purse, then again and again. "You should probably check that," Theo said, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "I suspect your son has done some research since we left the reception." I pulled out my phone and froze. 17 missed calls from Brandon, a flood of frantic messages. "Mom, call me immediately. Do you have any idea who Theodore Blackwood is? He's worth over $500 million. What is your relationship with him? Vivian's father wants to meet him about the building purchase. Can you arrange an introduction? Please call. We need to talk." I turned the screen toward Theo. He read them slowly, satisfaction flickering in his eyes. "Interesting," he murmured. "How quickly their interest in your personal life developed." "What are you going to do about the building?" I asked. "Nothing," he replied calmly. "The sale is final. Contracts are signed. Ashworth Properties has 90 days to relocate. Business is business." He paused, thoughtful. "Though I suppose if someone convinced me the current tenants had suddenly developed better manners and a proper appreciation for family relationships, I might consider a long-term lease." The message was unmistakable. This wasn't just about real estate anymore. It was about power, respect, and the sudden realization that the woman they'd dismissed all day wasn't so insignificant after all. My phone rang again. Vivian. I glanced at Theo. He gave a small nod. "Hello, Vivian." "Eleanor." Her voice was tight, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "I hope you're having a pleasant evening. Brandon and I were wondering if you might be free for dinner tomorrow night. We'd love to have a proper conversation, with you and Mr. Blackwood, of course, if he's available." The transformation was astonishing. 12 hours ago, I had been an embarrassment. Now, I was an opportunity. "I'll have to check with Theodore," I said smoothly, savoring every second. A heavy silence followed. "Of course," she managed. "Just let us know what works for your schedule." I ended the call and looked at Theo, who was grinning like a wolf. "Well," I said, lifting my wineglass, "this day certainly didn't go as expected." "The best days never do," he replied, clinking his glass against mine. "Now, shall we discuss what happens next?" The dinner invitation came with an address I immediately recognized, one of Denver's most exclusive restaurants. Apparently, when you suddenly need to impress someone worth over $500 million, you don't suggest Applebee's. Theo picked me up in a sleek Mercedes, looking devastatingly handsome in a navy suit that likely cost more than my entire wardrobe. I had chosen my best dress, a simple black one that Robert used to say made me look elegant. Tonight, under Theo's admiring gaze, I finally believed it. "Nervous?" he asked as we pulled up. "Should I be?" I replied lightly. "I'm only having dinner with my son and the daughter-in-law who thinks I'm an embarrassment to humanity. What could possibly go wrong?" Theo laughed, warm and rich. "There's the Eleanor I remember, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous when properly motivated." Brandon and Vivian were already seated when we arrived. They looked less like family and more like people preparing for a high-stakes negotiation. Vivian was immaculate, flawless makeup, perfect hair, a dress that screamed designer. She looked like she was auditioning for approval. "Mom," Brandon stood, his smile strained but present. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for joining us." "Theodore," Theo corrected easily, shaking his hand. "We're practically family, after all." I caught the sharp look Vivian shot Brandon. Practically family? They were already trying to decode what that meant. We were seated at a prime table overlooking the city lights. The staff treated Theo with unmistakable deference. Menus appeared instantly, wine was poured without delay, and the maitre d' personally ensured everything was flawless. "This is lovely," Vivian said with a polished smile. "Eleanor, you look wonderful. That dress is very flattering." I nearly choked on my water. Yesterday, I was too poor and embarrassing to sit with them. Tonight, I looked wonderful. "Thank you, dear," I replied sweetly. Amazing what good company can do. Under the table, Theo squeezed my hand. "So, Mr. Theodore," Brandon corrected himself. "Mom mentioned you two have a history together. She's been mysterious." "Not mysterious," I said calmly. "Selective. Children usually don't want details about their parents' romantic past, do they?" "Romantic?" The word hit the table like a spark. "Romantic?" Brandon echoed faintly. "Oh yes," Theo said warmly. "Your mother and I were very serious once. We had plans, a future." "What happened?" Vivian asked, unable to contain herself. Theo's expression darkened. "Her mother happened." Silence fell. "She decided I wasn't suitable," he continued. "When I left for London, she intercepted every letter I sent, every attempt to reach me." "She what?" Brandon's voice sharpened. "Every single one," I confirmed. "For 2 years, I believed he'd forgotten me. By the time he found me, I was already married." The weight of that truth settled heavily over the table. "I loved your father," I said firmly. "Robert was a good man. We had a solid marriage. But what Theo and I had—" "What exactly did you have?" Vivian pressed. Theo met my eyes. "Everything." The waiter interrupted to take our orders, giving everyone time to breathe. When he left, Brandon leaned forward. "Theodore, I need to ask directly, what are your intentions toward my mother?" Theo didn't hesitate. "To spend whatever time we have left making up for what we lost. Beyond that, it depends on what Eleanor wants." All eyes turned to me. For the first time in decades, my choice mattered. "What I want," I said slowly, "is to stop being treated like a burden. I want to be valued, not tolerated." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, if this is about yesterday—" "Yesterday was the result of months of being invisible, but we're not here to relive it." Vivian straightened. "We were just surprised. We didn't know you were seeing anyone." "I wasn't," I said bluntly. "Theo just appeared." "And the building?" Brandon asked. Theo's smile turned sharp. "What about it?" "Vivian's father is concerned about the lease." "Business is business," Theo said smoothly. "Though I might consider alternatives, under the right circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" Vivian asked quickly.
The kind where Eleanor is treated with respect, right flatly, starting with an apology. The air tightened. Brandon spoke first. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I should have defended you." It sounded sincere, and somehow that made it worse. "And you, Vivian?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, pride battling necessity. "I apologize for my comment about your poverty," she said stiffly. "Are you sorry you said it, or sorry there were consequences?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The rest of dinner passed politely, but beneath the surface, everything had changed. By dessert, the terms were clear. Respect Eleanor, and Theodore might reconsider the lease. As we stood to leave, Vivian touched my arm. "I hope we can start fresh. Perhaps Sunday dinner?" 6 months ago, I would have been thrilled. Tonight, I saw the move for what it was. "I'll check my calendar," I said pleasantly. "Theo and I have plans." The flicker of panic on her face was deeply satisfying. Sunday found me in Theo's penthouse suite, 2 floors of quiet luxury overlooking the mountains. Elegant, refined, effortless. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please." I settled into a chair that felt like pure comfort. "This place is beautiful, Theo. Very you. You remember me after 50 years? Some things don't change," he smiled. "You always had exquisite taste, even when we were young and broke." I took a sip of coffee, studying him. "I have to admit, it's hard to imagine you were ever broke."
Theo's laugh was soft, almost self-aware. Trust me, there were plenty of years when I wondered if I'd made the right choices. Building a business empire is lonely work, Eleanor, especially when the person you most wanted to share it with was living a completely different life. We sat in a comfortable silence, the weight of lost years settling quietly between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been lingering since yesterday. "Theo, why didn't you ever try to contact me after you found out I was married? You could have at least let me know you'd been looking." His expression tightened, shadowed with regret. "I thought about it. God knows I thought about it constantly. But you seemed happy in the photos I saw. You had a husband, a child, a life. What right did I have to disrupt that with news that my letters never reached you? You could have given me the choice." "I could have," he admitted quietly, "but I was young, proud, hurt. I convinced myself that if you'd really loved me, you would have found a way to reach me." I let out a sharp breath and set my coffee cup down. We were both idiots. "Spectacularly so," he agreed with a faint smile. "Though in my defense, your mother was a formidable opponent. The woman could have given Machiavelli lessons in manipulation." At the mention of my mother, a flood of memories surfaced, ones I had carefully buried. Margaret Wilson had been a force of nature, unyielding, certain that her way was the only right way, and ruthless in ensuring it. "She never liked you," I said quietly, "said you were too ambitious, too focused on money and status." Theo's lips curved slightly. Ironic, considering how thrilled she would be if she could see you now. "She was afraid you'd take me away from her." "She was right," he said simply. "I would have. We had plans, Eleanor. California after my London program, remember? Your mother couldn't stand the idea of losing control, so she made sure it never happened." "Not destroyed," Theo corrected when I exhaled shakily. "Redirected. You became a teacher. You shaped hundreds of lives. You raised a son. That matters." "Does it?" The bitterness slipped out before I could stop it. "Because right now it feels like the only thing that gives me value to my own family is my connection to you and your money." Theo reached across the table, taking my hand. "Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. It just makes them blind." My phone buzzed. Right on schedule. Brandon, his weekly check-in message. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. How was your week?" I showed Theo. He read it, unimpressed. "Every Sunday at 3 p.m., I said flatly. like clockwork. Duty fulfilled, guilt managed. What do you usually tell him? That I'm fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry about me. I stared at the screen, then looked at Theo. What do you think I should tell him today? Theo's grin turned wicked. The truth. Tell him you're having a wonderful weekend, that I'm showing you my art collection, that we're discussing travel plans. I hesitated for half a second, then typed it out and hit send. A thrill of rebellion shot through me. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. Mom? Brandon's voice was tight. Travel plans? Yes, sweetheart, I said sweetly. Theo has a house in Tuscany. We're thinking of spending a few weeks there this fall. Silence. Long enough to feel it. Finally, a few weeks in Italy with a man you just reconnected with? Is there a problem with that? Mom, you don't even have a passport. I renewed it last year. Your father and I were planning a cruise before he got sick. The memory ached, but softly now. We never went, but the passport is valid. But you've never traveled internationally. You've barely left Colorado since Dad died. Then it's time for a change, don't you think? I could practically hear his mind scrambling. What about your house, your responsibilities? What responsibilities, Brandon? My tone sharpened. What exactly is tying me down? Silence again, because we both knew the answer. Nothing. I just think you're moving too fast, he said finally. You've known him for what, 2 days? I've known him for 50 years. We're just picking up where we left off. Mom, be reasonable. You can't just run off to Italy with some man. Theo raised an eyebrow, amused. Some man? I repeated. Why not? I'm 68 years old, Brandon, not 8. I don't need your permission. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. For 3 years, you've treated me like I can't make my own decisions. Well, I can, and I will. I hung up before he could respond and turned the phone off. That, I said, exhaling, felt good. I imagine it did. Though I should mention, I don't actually have a house in Tuscany. I blinked. You don't? Not yet, he said lightly, but I can have one next week if you're interested. I stared at him, then burst into laughter. Theo, what exactly are we doing? We're living, he said simply. For the first time in 50 years, we're living. My phone vibrated again, despite being off. Theo smirked. I believe your son has more thoughts. Let him, I said. It'll be good for him. But deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. Monday morning. The knock on my door was sharp and deliberate. I opened it to find a woman in her 40s, perfectly styled blonde hair, perfect makeup, and the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Catherine Ashworth, Vivian's mother. Of course she was. The resemblance was indisputable. Calculating eyes, controlled posture, and that same air of entitlement. Mrs. Ashworth, I said calmly, this is unexpected. May I come in? We need to talk. Not a request, an assumption. I stepped aside. Of course. She entered like she was inspecting a property, eyes scanning everything, silently judging. Coffee? I offered. No, thank you. This won't take long. She sat in my best chair as if she owned it. I'll be direct. Your relationship with Theodore Blackwood is causing problems for my family. Is it? I sat opposite her, curious. Don't play coy, she snapped. You know exactly what you're doing. My husband's business is being threatened because you're using your connection to Theodore Blackwood as revenge against Vivian. Revenge is a dramatic word, I said mildly. I prefer natural consequences. This is extortion. No, I corrected calmly. This is business. Theodore purchased a building. Your husband's company happens to be a tenant. Unfortunate timing. Her eyes narrowed. We both know this is about the wedding. Oh, you heard about that? I said, feigning surprise. How embarrassing. She leaned forward. I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm prepared to make this worth your while. Worth my while? I echoed, curious. She reached into her designer bag and placed a check on the table. $50,000. Convince your boyfriend to honor the lease with Ashworth Properties. I stared at it, not shocked by the amount, but by the audacity. Mrs. Ashworth, are you attempting to bribe me? I'm offering a mutually beneficial arrangement. Compensation, I repeated slowly. For what, exactly? I met her eyes. How much did Vivian tell you about what happened at the wedding? Enough to understand that money is a concern for you, and you assumed that meant I was for sale. Catherine's smile turned razor sharp. Mrs. Patterson, everyone is for sale. It's just a matter of finding the right price. I stood slowly and walked toward the window, my gaze settling on the garden Robert and I had planted 15 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, their crimson petals glowing under the morning sun. It wasn't extravagant like the Ashworth estate, no sprawling lawns or sculpted hedges, but it was mine, built from 40 years of teaching, loving, and sharing a life with a good man. You know what's funny, Mrs. Ashworth? I said quietly without turning around. Yesterday, I might have been tempted by your offer, not because I need the money, but because I've spent so long being dismissed, overlooked, undervalued, that $50,000 might have felt like validation. And today? Catherine asked, her voice losing its edge. I turned to face her. Whatever she saw in my expression made her shift in her chair. Today, I know exactly what I'm worth, I said calmly, and it's considerably more than $50,000. I walked over, picked up the check, and examined it like a meaningless artifact. This is insulting, Mrs. Ashworth. Not just the amount, though that's laughably inadequate. The real insult is the assumption that my relationship with Theodore is something that can be bought. I tore the check in half, then again, and again, letting the pieces fall onto the table between us. My relationship with Theodore is none of your business. The lease is none of mine. If your husband wants to negotiate, he's perfectly capable of picking up the phone. Catherine's composure shattered. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Patterson. The Ashworth family has considerable influence in this city. We can make things very difficult for people who cross us. Are you threatening me? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm explaining reality. I laughed, surprising both of us with how real it sounded. 3 days ago, that might have frightened me. Today, it's amusing. I stepped closer. She leaned back instinctively. I've spent 50 years being afraid, of disappointing people, of not being enough, of taking up too much space. But yesterday, I sat across from a man who sees my worth. A man who spent 50 years trying to find me because he believed I was worth finding. I held her gaze. Do you really think your social influence scares me now? She stood abruptly, flushed with anger. This isn't over. Yes, I replied calmly. It is. You came here to buy my compliance. Instead, you showed me exactly who you are. Thank you for that clarity. She stormed toward the door, then paused for one last attempt. Your son is married to my daughter, Mrs. Patterson. That makes us family. You should think about Brandon's future. I've spent 35 years thinking about Brandon's future. It's time he started thinking about mine. After she left, the silence in my living room felt different, lighter. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of what might happen if I stood up for myself. My phone rang. Theodore. I answered with a smile in my voice. Good morning, handsome. Good morning, beautiful. How's your day starting? Interestingly, I said, glancing at the torn pieces of the check, I just had a very enlightening conversation with Catherine Ashworth. Did you? He said, lightly. I hope you were impressed by her charm and subtlety. Deeply impressed. She offered me $50,000 to convince you to honor the lease. Silence. 50,000, he said, finally, his voice carefully controlled. I told her it was insulting, not just because of the assumption, but yes, also because the amount was ridiculously low. His laughter came rich and warm. "Eleanor, my darling, you never cease to amaze me. What did you do?" I told her my relationship with you isn't for sale. Then I tore up her check. You tore up $50,000. It felt wonderful, I admitted, very therapeutic. "In that case," he said, a playful edge in his voice, "I have a proposal." "Oh? How would you like to help me send the Ashworth family a message about how to treat people they consider beneath them?" "What kind of message?" "Something spectacular," he said. "Something that makes $50,000 look like pocket change." I smiled. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Lunch. I have something to show you." An hour later, I sat in the back seat of Theodore's Mercedes as we pulled into Denver's financial district. We stopped in front of a sleek glass tower, one of the most prestigious business addresses in the city. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To meet my attorney," he said. "We have papers to sign." "What kind of papers?" "The kind," he replied, "that will make the Ashworth family very, very sorry they ever heard your name." Margaret Chen was exactly what you'd expect from someone who managed the legal affairs of powerful people, sharp, precise, and utterly unflappable. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, shaking my hand, "Theodore has told me quite a lot about you. All good things, I hope? Only the most interesting ones." She opened a thick file and spread documents across the desk. "I've reviewed the Ashworth family's financial structure. On the surface, they appear stable. In reality, they're dangerously over-leveraged." She pointed to the figures. "The building Theodore owns isn't just their office. It represents nearly 30% of their operating capital." "Meaning?" I asked. "They can't move," Theodore answered. "Not without severe consequences." Margaret nodded. "Relocation costs alone would approach $2 million, and that's before higher rent elsewhere." I exhaled slowly. So when Catherine offered me $50,000, she was trying to save her family from financial collapse. "Exactly," Theodore said, though I imagine she left that detail out. The irony settled heavily and sweetly. "What are our options?" I asked. Margaret slid another set of papers forward. "We proceed with termination, and they absorb the loss, or, Theodore prompted, "we offer a revised lease, higher rate, shorter term, and behavioral clauses." "Behavioral?" I repeated. "The kind that require certain standards, ethical conduct, community engagement, public accountability." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to write their humiliation into a contract." "I want consequences," Theodore said calmly. "Real ones." Margaret added, "You'd be surprised what people agree to when survival is at stake." By the time she finished outlining the terms, I was both impressed and slightly stunned. "There's one more thing," Theodore said. I looked at him. "I want you to be a signatory on the agreement." "Me?" "You're the reason this exists. You deserve a voice in how it ends." I laughed softly. "You make it sound like they need rehabilitation." "They do," he said quietly. "They forgot what it means to treat people with dignity." Margaret closed the file. "They'll have 72 hours to respond. After that, termination proceeds." "Have they been notified?" "The offer goes out this afternoon." And just like that, the balance of power had shifted. Completely. As we prepared to leave, Theodore took my hand. "Eleanor, are you comfortable with this? I need to know you're fully on board before we proceed." I paused. Catherine Ashworth's attempt to buy my compliance flashed through my mind. Vivian's casual cruelty at the wedding. The way she had assumed my poverty made me less than human. Then came the deeper memories, years of being dismissed, overlooked, treated like an obligation instead of a person. I lifted my chin. "I'm more than comfortable," I said firmly. "I'm excited." That evening, at exactly 6 p.m., my phone rang, right on schedule. Brandon, though his usual weekly check-in had been moved up by a full day. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" "Good evening to you too, sweetheart," I replied calmly. "I'm fine, thank you for asking." "Don't play games with me. Vivian's mother just called in tears. Something about lease agreements, impossible demands, financial ruin. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said truthfully. "Theodore made a business decision based on standard market practices." "Standard market practices don't include forcing tenants to make public apologies as part of lease agreements." Ah, so they had read the fine print. "Is that what the contract says? How interesting." "Mom, you can't be serious about this. You're talking about destroying an entire family's livelihood over a wedding seating arrangement." "Am I?" I replied quietly. "I thought I was ensuring certain standards of human decency were maintained in business relationships. This is extortion." "No, Brandon, this is consequences. There's a difference, though I understand why you might not recognize it." Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable. Then, more controlled this time. "What do you want, Mom? What will it take to make this go away?" The question lingered. What did I want? For 50 years, I had wanted to be valued, respected, seen. For the past 3 years, since Robert died, I had wanted my son to see me as more than a responsibility to manage. "I want," I said slowly, "for your wife to understand that treating people like dirt has consequences. I want her family to learn that money and status don't give them the right to humiliate others." I paused. "And I want you to decide whether you're on their side or mine." "Mom, that's not fair." "Fair?" The word slipped out sharper than intended. "When has anything about the last 3 years been fair to me? When was it fair that you seated me in the back row at your wedding like a stranger? When was it fair that your wife called me a poverty-stricken embarrassment? She apologized for that. She apologized because Theodore has power. Where was that apology before? Where was yours?" Another silence. Longer this time. "What do you want me to do?" Brandon asked, his voice smaller now. "I want you to choose. Vivian's family has 72 hours to accept Theodore's lease terms or find somewhere else to go." I let the words settle. "During those 72 hours, you decide who you stand with, the family that humiliated your mother or the mother who loves you anyway." "Mom." "I'm done talking, Brandon." My voice softened, but only slightly. "The next conversation we have will tell me everything I need to know about the man I raised." And with that, I hung up. Then I turned off my phone. For the first time in 3 years, I was in control. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Now all that remained was to see what my son would choose. The call came at exactly 5 p.m. on Wednesday, 71 hours and 15 minutes after the lease terms had been delivered. I was in Theodore's penthouse pretending to help him choose artwork for the Tuscany house he had purchased that very morning when his phone rang. "Theodore Blackwood," he answered, placing it on speaker. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Richard Ashworth. I believe you're expecting my call." The strain in his voice was unmistakable. "Yes, Mr. Ashworth. I trust you've reviewed the proposal thoroughly." "We have, and my family would like to accept your terms." It clearly cost him. "All of them?" Theodore asked calmly, "including the public conduct clauses and community service requirements?" "Yes." "And the personal apologies?" A pause. Longer this time. "Yes." Though he hesitated, his answer was final. "The terms are non-negotiable," Theodore said evenly. "Your daughter-in-law's public apology will be delivered exactly as specified. Otherwise, the lease termination proceeds as planned." "I understand." "When would you like the first apology delivered?" "This Friday, at the charity luncheon. Mrs. Patterson will attend as my guest. I glanced at Theodore, surprised but impressed. The symmetry was perfect. The same social circle that had witnessed my humiliation would now witness accountability. "We'll be there," Richard said. "Excellent." The call ended. Theodore turned to me. "Are you ready for this? Once it happens, there's no going back." I didn't hesitate. It needs to change. Friday arrived bright and unseasonably warm, as if the universe itself had decided this moment deserved perfect lighting. My hair and makeup had been professionally done. My dress was elegant, understated. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman worth apologizing to. The country club buzzed with Denver's social elite. They were there for charity, but more importantly, they were there to watch. I recognized faces, the same women who had whispered about me at the wedding. Now, though, they smiled. "Mrs. Patterson, how lovely to see you again." The transformation was almost amusing. "I'm surprised you remember me," I said lightly. "Of course, you looked so elegant at the wedding." Of course I had. They just hadn't cared. Until now. We took our seats near the front. Conversations quieted. Eyes lingered. Whispers shifted from dismissive to curious. The Ashworth family sat further back, visible but distant. Vivian looked flawless as always, but her composure was brittle. She kept glancing at me, waiting. Then came the announcement. Vivian approached the podium. The room fell silent. "Last week at my wedding," she began, voice steady but tight, "I said something cruel to my mother-in-law." A pause. "I told her her poverty would embarrass our family." Gasps, barely contained. "I was wrong, completely wrong." Her voice trembled. "Eleanor Patterson is a woman of dignity, strength, and character. She deserved respect, not the treatment I gave her." A deeper breath. "I'm genuinely sorry, and I hope someday she can forgive me." She stepped back. Uncertain applause followed. I stood. Every eye turned. This was my moment. "Thank you, Vivian," I said clearly. "Your apology is noted and appreciated." Polite, controlled, and unmistakably distant. Forgiveness had not been given, only acknowledged. As we left, Theodore glanced at me. "How do you feel?" I smiled. Free. And for the first time in years, it was true. My phone buzzed. A message from Brandon. "Mom, can we talk?" I looked at it, then locked the screen. "Tomorrow," I replied. "Your move." For 50 years I had lived by other people's rules, accepted their judgments, allowed them to define my worth. But not anymore. At 68 years old, I was finally writing my own ending, and this time, it was going to be spectacular.